Hi everybody, Paul Gallagher. Today I want to talk about controlling clipped highlights, which is quite a common thing in terms of, like, there might be sunlight on seawalls or on a river. You get specular highlights. You might be photographing cities of a night. This is a classic situation in Hokkaido in Japan where I didn't have time to fit filters. I don't think they would have done much for me anyway, and I just had to underexpose whilst the clouds were moving around very quickly, and underexposed to make the disk of the white sun as small as possible, so I'm not clipping any more highlights than I absolutely need to. So this has resulted in a histogram up here that's all bunched to the left. But one of the issues we've got is that this is little spike here, that's the highlights that are blown. So it only really affects a tiny portion of the image, but it's important. If I was to print this with that still blown like that, what we would have is a part of the print where it laid no ink down. And I don't want that. I want to try and manage the highlights so we get a print where it does lay down ink. We don't have to have tonal variation in there, but it does lay down ink. So how do we manage this? What do we do? I don't want a bare patch on the print, so how do I manage it? Now, we think that, we've underexposed the image, but we still need to underexpose it more. So what do? Do we bring the exposure across here? Do we bring that down to bring the sun in, to manage that highlight? Well, it's damaged virtually the entire image, trying to rescue probably 2 or 3% of the area of the image itself. I mean, the trees have gone solid black. We can't see the picture, so that's clearly not going to work. Okay, so we'll double click on that to get it into the center again. Now, could we use whites? Because after all, this should reside in the whites. So let's left click on the white slider and bring that to the left slowly but surely. And what we've done is we've expended all the whites. So what this is throwing at us is a bit of a problem, okay? And all that we're doing now is the more we're trying to manage this small part of the image, we're ruining the other 98% of the image, which is no point. What we need to do is just manage this by itself. So I'm going to double click on that, get it back to the starting point, and we're going to move out of the basics tab here, up here, and we're going to move from there, from basics, we're going to move up here to tone curve, the next box to the right. We're going to click on that. Now, if it's the first time you've opened it up, you'll probably see this: highlights, lights, darks, and shadows. Okay, and a histogram basically with the curve line across it. Now, parametric won't help us here, because our problem is here on the right, that little spike, that's our white of our sun clipped. And parametric curve will not allow us to basically control the white point by itself. We have to go to the next one along, go from parametric to point. Let's click on that. Now, once again, we've still got our spike, which is the sun here, but we're going to go up. So very top right-hand corner. Grab hold of that corner and just bring it down. And straight away what we've done is we've managed the sun here. Now, this is useful for two reasons. One, it brings the whites in of the sun, so we've not got that blown highlight. By a very tiny little action like this, we've managed to do that. But also what it does is it clips the white, it sets the white point, it pegs the white point, it stops it from going over. So now, if we go back to our basics tab here, to our basic sliders, we can then basically reintroduce the exposure that we couldn't do in the field without blowing the highlights. We'll see that the highlight point here is locked. It can't move any further to the right. So if we move that across now, we can introduce the sunlight to the image. Now, we know this area still looks a bit bright, but we can rest assured that it's not blown. And what we can do now is we can bring the highlight down. And we should start seeing the disk of our sun slowly but surely reappearing. Okay, now then we can work away now. We can maybe add a little bit of clarity, so we can introduce some of the shadow on the snow there, and we can do some localized adjustments. But what it's done is it's got us out of a very sticky situation, and that sticky situation was the fact that the disk of the sun, the one small 2% of probably of the image, was dictating all our tonal range whilst we were in the initial stages of processing. Now we don't have to. We can move things around, and we know, we'll start to see the tonality in the image now, and we know that this is locked in place. If we go back to where we started, we'll click that on, and there. So it's a huge difference to the image purely by managing the one small part of the sun. So that's the first image I want to look at. Now, for the second image on controlling highlights and whites in images, I'm going to turn to a picture taken at the Bund in Shanghai in China whilst I was on a trip to Yellow Mountain a few years ago. And as you'd expect with a cityscape, trying to control the highlights of illuminated buildings is very, very difficult indeed. And it might not look much here, but if we go in and have a closer look, we can see that there's a good chunk of the front of these buildings here, and certainly here, that are blown out. That's blown out there. And the other parts will be small, like signs and things like that. But what they are is the highlights of the buildings. And so that's the very part of the image that the viewer's eye is going to go to, and they're all going to be blown. So it's nice, it would be nice if we could bring them into check. But also, after we've brought them into check, like we did with the Hokkaido image, is it enables us to alter the rest of the image in whatever way we want. So, once again, if we were to bring down whites, we can see that it doesn't solve the problem. When we go into the image, there's big portions of the front of the building here that are lost through overexposure. So we're going to double click that, Command 0 to see the entire image on the screen. And we're going to go once again, we're going to go from the Basics tab here, I'm going to go across to here, which is Tone Curve. Click on that. We're not going to use parametric, we're going to use a point curve. And we'll do exactly the same thing. We'll just bring that down a small part, and in doing so we can see, if I do that, you can see all the highlights in the buildings coming in. Okay, it's pegged the highlights in the buildings beautifully. Then we can go back to the Basics tab, and now that the highlights are locked, we can do whatever we like. We can up the exposure, we maybe bring down the highlights, maybe add a little bit of clarity to bring the sheen out of the water. And all of a sudden what we've got is something like the city is glowing of a night. If we switch that on and off, we can see we've gone from that to that. So we've actually brightened up the image, but we've retained the highlights in the lights in the building. Works fine. I'm sure everyone's got pictures where there's some highlights blown. You may have grappled with them. It may be a seascape. It may be in a building, in a city, whatever it is. But use this first, peg the highlights, get them managed, and then you can move on. With peace of mind, knowing that you're not going to blow your highlights again whilst you're still in Camera Raw.